Hello, I'm Karen Timer Brown, President and CEO of Historic Annapolis. We all know that Annapolis is special. It is a national historic landmark and a national treasure. And City Dock is the beating heart of the historic district, a focal point, a historic seaport, and a gateway to the bay. Historic Annapolis has advocated for the historic district for 72 years to maintain its scale and historic character. Annapolis today does not look this way by accident or passiveness. It's taken years of active preservation and protections to maintain the look and character-defining human scale of this renowned historic district. City Dock has changed significantly over the years. The shoreline and its use has changed. It's evolved from a working waterfront to a recreational tourism attraction. And City Dock is vulnerable, subject to sea level rise, land subsidence, and resiliency issues. Now it is ripe for improvement. Redevelopment must prioritize resiliency and must be thoughtful and deliberate to truly reflect the community. Attractiveness, permanence, and resilience are extremely important factors in the life of our living city. City Dock has been subject to threats and insensitive change over the years. In 1964, the Hilton Hotel, now the Annapolis Waterfront Hotel, was built, and that marked a significant change to our historic landscape. HA was successful in reducing the height 30 feet from 7 to 5 stories. In 1969, the Market House was threatened by demolition and replacement with a parking facility. Successful opposition prevented that outcome and served as a catalyst for the passage of the Historic District Ordinance. And a decade later, the Height and Bulk Ordinance was passed in 1978 to regulate the size and mass of buildings in the Historic District. This regulation has been in place for close to 50 years. I mention these watershed events to illustrate that HA has been actively engaged in this activity for over 70 years. This is what we do. And while we support redevelopment of City Dock and progress and resiliency efforts, we must emphasize that the improvements must be sensitive to preservation, retain our historic character, and adhere to these regulations. Now, while City Dock redevelopment has been studied over and over, in fact, there have been over 20 studies since the 1980s, let's talk about more recent community planning efforts that bring us to today. The city-sponsored City Dock Advisory Committee came about in 2011. This was a group of key stakeholders who crafted a vision for a reimagined City Dock. The vision included access to the waterfront, opportunities to create shade and seating and green space without interfering with key vistas. It speaks to the need for a preservation ethic that is reflected in our treatment of City Dock. Additional studies were recommended to implement the plan. The city also prepared a cultural landscape report in 2018. This study concluded, among other things, that, quote, the old shoreline at City Dock is a character-defining focal point, unquote. Now, also in 2018, a proposal to redevelop the end of Dock Street, we know it today as Latitude 38, was being circulated. This hotel plan necessitated a change to the height limit. While the proposed ordinance did not advance, which would make way for an overscaled multi-story hotel, the broader preservation community, including our national partners, saw this as a threat to the integrity of our historic core and, importantly, the height restrictions that have been in place for decades. And thus, City Dock was then designated as one of America's 11 most endangered historic places by the National Trust for Historic Preservation to call national attention to the vulnerability and the threat. So what could we do as a community in response to this designation? HA raised funds to bring in the Urban Land Institute to conduct a technical assistance panel, or TAP. Internally, we call this a SWAT Team approach to community-based urban planning. The TAP was a panel of professionals who came from all over for an intense 2-day up-close professional evaluation of City Dock. They identified challenges and opportunities and listened to the community numerous stakeholders, and elected officials. The evaluation was synthesized in a report. One of the many recommendations was to create a City Dock Action Committee, which we call the CDAC. The CDAC and various subcommittees would build upon the TAP recommendations and come up with a plan. This year-long process was highly collaborative. Subcommittees focused on various subject areas to include finance and programming, design and historic preservation. HA, city leadership, and numerous committee members worked together. Historic Annapolis also brought in the National Park Service, and together we prepared 2 additional studies. First, an interpretive plan for the City Dock area, which addressed the cultural touchstones and stories that can be told at City Dock. And second, a feasibility study and adaptive reuse plan for the William Burtis House, the sole surviving historic waterman's home in the project area. The final report was issued in 2020. Like previous plans, the report centers around guiding principles. One guiding principle that is important to us preservationists is this, quote, preserving and enhancing downtown Annapolis's maritime heritage, character, and viewsheds by honoring the existing building and zoning envelope and maritime focus, unquote. Another recommendation in the report is to, quote, build an adjacent 1-story structure close to the Burtis House to provide any needed overflow for transient boater supplies and facilities or to house electrical utilities for docking, unquote. I will leave you with a watercolor rendering commissioned for the final CDAC plan as a reminder of what the community's consensus plan vision. As you can see, a lot of people have devoted time to reimagining City Dock for the future, including Historic Annapolis. And as we have before, we welcome opportunities to continue working with the city and to serve as a reliable partner in supporting our future. Thanks.